Hey painting friends, it's Stoof here. I'm back in my studio in Pittsburgh and it's gray and cloudy outside like a typical Pittsburgh day, and I'm missing Florida. Just got back from a 3-week trip in Florida and that's what inspired my painting for today. So we're gonna make this little acrylic painting of 2 pelicans. I snapped this reference photo in Biscayne National Park in Florida. I actually was watching these pelicans for like 5 minutes because one of them looked like he was fishing and he like swooped down and tried to get a fish but he missed. So I kept watching him and I thought he was gonna try again and get a fish, but he didn't. But I still got this photo and I decided to paint these little guys. These are brown pelicans. So we are going to use soft-bodied acrylic paints. This is an 8" by 10" panel. This one can be done in less than 2 hours. It's going to be a little bit easier for intermediate to advanced acrylic painters. It's going to be a little more difficult for beginner painters just because I do a lot of layering in this water and you might start to get lost or frustrated. So if you're a beginner, you're welcome to try this one. Just take your time with it, and if you get a little frustrated, just go back and you can always paint over your mistakes. That's the great thing about acrylic paint. So let's dive into this tutorial together. We're using my Liquitex soft body acrylic paints today on an 8" by 10" canvas panel. Started with Mars Black. Get some Phthalo Blue. Titanium White. Ultramarine Blue. Sap Green. Yellow Ochre or Yellow Oxide. Yellow Medium Azo. Some Magenta. Probably didn't need that much. Some Light Portrait Pink. It's like a flesh tint. And what else do we need? Let's use some of our Sky Blue Violet or Light Blue Violet. And definitely need some Burnt Sienna. And some Raw Umber. Alright, those are the paints we're using today. Now let's take a look at our brushes. Okay, so for our brushes, I have this larger flat tip brush, which will be nice for blocking in some base color. I have this somewhat smaller semi-round tip brush, which will be used for getting things starting to get detailed, maybe blocking in more color. I have this angled brush, be good for getting some of those waves. A round tip brush, which might be good for some blending. A flat tip brush, which is also going to be good for blending and good for getting some of those little ridge lines in the waves. Then I have 2 liner brushes. One's a thicker one, which will also be used for ridge lines, like little highlights on the waves. And this finer one is going to be for like the little tiny lines and feathers on the pelicans. And here's another round tip brush, good for blending. I also have a few paper towels and a cup of water for cleaning off my brushes. So we're going to start by dipping the brush in the water and just taking some blue, thinning it down. And then we're going to sketch where the pelicans go. So these pelicans, to really break it down, they have like a rectangle, they fit inside a rectangle shape. They don't physically have a rectangular shape, but they fit inside a rectangular shape. So I'm going to start by just kind of sketching my rectangle. And so you can also do this, put a little crosshair in the center of your painting, put little ticks separating the painting into 4 quadrants. So now looking at our bottom one, the top of our rectangle is below, just below that center line from top to bottom, that center divider. And it doesn't come quite this far to the right. Comes a little bit past center there. Bring that down, comes to about right, about 1 inch above the bottom. And it does come out to center there. So there's my first rectangle, and then I'm just going to put a little, I'm going to cut that rectangle in half, okay? and get a little more paint. And now I can start to sketch out the skeleton, the skeleton. Now I can start to sketch out the pelican. We are going to do like an oval shape here. So the head is in this side. So I'm just doing a big oval that kind of comes almost down to the base, even a little bit wider there. There we go. And I'm going to start to make things a little darker so that we can get a more defined outline. So he's got a really round head here. And then his beak just goes straight down like this. And it kind of makes a little curve here for the body. And his face is somewhere in there. So now you can kind of see the shape of the pelican's head. All right, and then the base of the pelican just comes down a little bit more to the bottom of your rectangle. And now let's start to make our way into this left side of the rectangle. So about halfway from this line you just made, make a little dot at your halfway point there on this little swirl. And you're going to start at like a 30-degree angle, kind of going up. And it's going to kind of flatten out, touch the edge there, and come back down, kind of rounded. And he's just got a little line there for his little wing. And that's the basic shape for that pelican. Now we have our proportions accurate for the head versus the body because we made this rectangle and we know about how much. We basically just made a small version of the grid method here. So we put everything in this grid to keep the body and the head proportionate to each other. And there's a little bit of a reflection of him kind of under him, but you don't have to really work on that too far yet. All right, let's really water down that paint again and do our next rectangle back here where we have another pelican. So looking in this upper left quadrant, we're going to have a smaller rectangle because this pelican's farther away. So if they were the same size, this one's farther away, so he's going to be smaller. So we're going to put him looking at our center line about an inch to the left. He's about an inch from the top. Just like that. And he's at a pretty similar angle for his body, but his face is turned to face the viewer, so it makes him slightly shorter lengthwise than this rectangle. And then we're going to just do our same thing, divide that again in half. And start to sketch out the pelican's body. So the pelican's head is again on this side, and it's, if you do another line separating this in half, it's all on this side, is his head. And just comes right down to the bottom of that rectangle. If you want to thicken up your paint a little bit, you can get that shape better. And his neck goes right there. His chest kind of sticks out a little bit. And then for the body, the crest or the top part of his back is right at that center line. And then it starts to kind of bend over to the side and come down. Not quite to the base of your rectangle, but close. And the paint's bleeding a little bit because I thinned it down so much, but that is the basic shape for our next pelican. You can see his little foot underwater there too. It's cute. Okay, so this one's smaller than this one. This one's looking that way. This one's looking at us. Now that we have the basic shape for our pelicans, we can start filling in the background colors and building up the painting. So now I'm going to take my large flat tip brush, and there is a lot going on with the background, so don't get overwhelmed looking at it right now. What we're going to do is start with a base color. Since this water is clear and you can kind of see the seagrass kind of ochre brown underneath, that's what I'm going to start with. And then we're going to add our layers over top. Just like you can see the layers of water rippling over top of the seagrass, that's how we're going to paint it. So we're going to take some burnt umber and some phthalo blue and some ochre. And we'll take a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of yellow azo, more yellow azo, and we'll do some black too. A little more brown. And basically just use that color to cover up your whole canvas. And you want to get a thick application of paint. Like right now you can see some streaks because I didn't really blend enough paint here. But you want to have enough paint that's going to cover the canvas very well. And you can go right up to the Pelican's body. Don't worry about his reflection right now because we can paint that next, or you know, later on. Just work on getting that background totally covered with this brownish yellow color. So once I get that paint all covered up, now I'm just very lightly pressing and holding this brush, very gently touching the canvas, and it's gliding and it's blending that paint and it's giving me that even coverage that I'm looking for, not really leaving any blotchy marks. It's kind of just letting it all blend together by very lightly pressing and letting your colors blend in. So while this paint is still a little bit wet, what I'm going to do is clean off this brush without putting it in the water. I'm just going to wipe the excess paint off the brush, and then we're going to take some ochre and some white and some yellow and a tiny hint of sap green. And then we're just going to get that nice and good in the brush there. Nice and blended in so we don't have any more of that darker color in the bristles anymore. And we're just going to start to make some little waves. So coming out from almost the top of this pelican's head, you're just going to make a little wave like that. Just almost like a little U or two little humps like that. And once you get that one, put another little one right here. Put one under this one. So we're just starting to show where we're going to have a couple highlights under the water. And once you get those down, then I want you to take the extra paint off your brush and do that nice gentle blend again. So very lightly pressing, letting this color kind of blend into the color under it. Doesn't have to be totally perfect, but we don't want to have any like super harsh edges. We want to have a smooth blend of this highlight into that base color we first put down. Very lightly pressing. There we go. All right, take that same color again. Maybe add a little more ochre if you want. And we'll start to add another one right here. Another one right there. Another one right here. And then just blend them out again. Get the extra paint off your brush that helps you with blending. And pressing very gently. Try to leave a little bit of that base color in between your highlights. You don't want your highlights to all run in together. Another little one here. And then here, do one like this. Okay, we'll take a little more yellow, white. So I'm trying to be as descriptive as possible with how to hold the brush, how much pressure to use with the brush, and how to blend your colors. But if you're an absolute beginner, this painting is going to be difficult. So if you're starting to get frustrated with it, some great things to learn and research before coming back and trying to make this painting are some brushstroke techniques. Maybe color blending seems to come more naturally to people than brushstroke techniques. So yeah, I would say practice different brushstroke techniques with how much force to use, how to blend, things like that will help you a lot with this painting here. We've got a bunch of little highlights in here. The water gets a little bit rougher. Got a few more in here too. And the base layer is starting to dry a little bit more now. So blending is turning a little bit more into like dry brushing, where I'm kind of just blending it out by pressing a little harder to let that color blend out because the layer under it is dry. Alright, so now we got some little highlights in there. Going to put that brush back in the water. And next, let's start to add some of the blue that we see in the water here. So I'm going to take my angled flat tip brush. You could use a regular flat tip brush too. Just make sure it has a little longer bristle. See how this brush has shorter bristles. So this brush is better for kind of pushing the paint around, and this brush is better for gliding paint over top of other paint. So you want to use this longer bristled brush. And we're just going to take some, let's start with the shadows and then we'll build up the highlights. So take some phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, a little bit of our sap green, and a little white. And we take a little more phthalo blue. That is a pretty good color. And we're going to take this and we're going to start to add some sections that have more blue in them. And the paint is still a little wet, so it's starting to blend a little bit here. We're going to keep layering. That's how we're going to get this painting done. So we're just kind of start here and kind of make a triangle, or like kind of make an angle coming back and off. And then we've got shadows around the pelicans, so make sure on the right side and a little bit behind the pelican you add some of this blue. Let that blend out a little bit. Same thing over here. Take a little more phthalo blue, ultramarine, and white. And a little more phthalo. Do a little black too. And let's do more phthalo and black. I want to darken this down some. There we go. Okay. We're going to take that and start to add some more shadows. Basically everything keeps the same fluid shape, like making these sinal waves. Way more blue up here. Just take some pure phthalo blue if you want, with a little bit of black. Keep that wave look. Gonna make it really dark up here. By making the edges darker, it kind of draws your attention into the center of the painting. Gonna make it darker down here too in this corner. Go back to our first color of the blue and just kind of keep a little space between the pelican and the blue here for the where we're going to add the reflection of this pelican. And we'll come back where we started here. Start to add a little bit more over here. Basically, wherever you have your highlight here, you want to have a shadow. Shadow kind of keeps the same shape. Going back to our really dark shadows along the edge of the canvas. Starts to create these like eye shapes. I'm not sure what those are called. I forget what those are called. Leave a comment if you remember what those are called. And then we'll just keep making these waves here, these ridges in shadow. We've got some pure sap green in a couple of these sections above the highlights, right before your dark shadow. Down here, the water's a little clearer. You can see green in your shadows. Same over here. Alrighty. It's coming along. So it looks really dark right now. But that's okay because that's how I work. I start with the base color, then I add shadows, and then I start to add highlights and things start to come to life. So I just cleaned off that brush really well. And next I'm just going to let that dry and block in some base color for these pelicans while that's drying. So we're gonna get the brush nice and dry. And we're gonna start with the pelican in the back. So he's got some burnt sienna, some white, ochre, and burnt umber. More umber. There we go. And we're just going to, a little more sienna maybe. It's a little bit warmer colored than I thought. And some ochre. A little flesh color too. That's better. All right, and then we're just gonna fill that base layer of paint in for the pelican's body. Just use that brown color for everything to get started. Then we can add more detail to his body later. Try to keep that shape that you made earlier. And if you make a mistake, you can always just let it dry and then come back and touch it up later. All right, that's good. And then we're going to take some white and some of our light blue violet. Kind of make your new little paint mixing spot next to the first one you did, and we're going to do the body of the closer and larger pelican. Again, just basically keeping that shape. There we go. And then for the face, let's just take a little more of our light blue, violet, and white without cleaning your brush off. And we'll just, they've got like a slightly bluish gray looking beak. Get the head here. And the beak. This one's beak comes down a little bit lower than his body. And I'll do this one's beak real quick. Beak's got a little bit of brown in it too, which I'll get later. Want your beak to come down about as far as the body. And keep a straight line, try not to have any curves in the beak shape. And this pelican's head is a dark brown, so I'm just going to take that umber right there and just put his little head right there. And he's got a little tummy sticking out here. There we go. And this guy's got a white head, so I'm just going to take some white. We'll put that down. Try to get the shape as close as you can. But if you do make a mistake, we can always go back and fix it. Alright, it's looking pretty nice. And this guy's got a little bit of blue, just like right above his beak. He's got a little yellow in there too. Just put a little bit there so I don't forget to do that later. And we'll get their eyes later. Now we're going to let this stuff keep drying. The background's still a little bit wet, so we'll let this dry for like 10 minutes, grab a snack and a drink, and then come back and we'll finish this up. Alright, so I just got distracted and this was more like an hour of dry time, so that's why it looks much darker now, because the paint dries darker. But yeah, we're ready to get back at it. And we basically want to get the background totally done, and then we'll finish up with the birds. So next, let's take this brush, which is our liner brush, but it's a thicker liner brush. Nice long bristles for just getting that paint right on there. And we're going to start with our light blue violet and take a little of our phthalo blue and some white, more white, more phthalo. I want a color that's like a little darker than that, but warmer. There we go. That'll work. Okay, maybe a little more. And I'm just going to dip this in the water to get it really thin down. Really easy to make some nice fluid movements here. And we're going to start by just making these little waves, very lightly pressing. Just kind of making a bunch of little crescent shapes and connecting little waves. Make sure they're not all like right over top of each other. And we're just putting these over the blue. We're not putting these over the brown. Only over the dark blue sections. It's okay if you kind of go over the bird a little bit. And once you kind of get the hang of the angle of the brush stroke and what it's supposed to look like, then you can start to speed up. And you want your ripply highlights to be a little bit bigger towards the foreground here. It's a little darker up here. All right, so that's getting us closer. Also going to take this brush and just take some phthalo blue and brown, or my burnt umber. A little more burnt umber. That's good. I'm going to thin that paint down again, and I'm going to start to add more little ripples, kind of like over some of these ones that I did first. Starting to kind of blend some of these in a little bit. Make them a little bit less noticeable in some spots. Kind of blending out the edges. Just kind of blending some of them, leaving some of them. This is where you kind of need to take your own artistic liberty, because if you try to copy exactly what I'm doing here, it's just gonna get frustrating. So just kind of use your artistic freedom here and pick some of them to get a little fuzzed out, some of these to be a little sharper. Gonna thin the paint down again and go back with another round of highlights in some spots. We have like this kind of ring of ripples around this pelican here. A little bit of that's happening here. Now I just cleaned off my brush really well. I'm going to start to add more of these bright little highlights from the seagrasses underwater. So I'm taking some ochre, some of my yellow azo, some white, a tiny hint of my sap green, some more white, ochre, some more ochre. There we go. A little bit of green. Good. And I'm going to water that down again. These are already really thin paints, but it's going to dry more quickly if I keep thinning the paint down, and it's going to get me that extra little bit of control over the paint. So there's just like a ton of these tiny little highlights under the water from the seagrass reflecting. And I'm just kind of scribbling the brush around, and I think I create these little highlights in some spots. And because the paint's still a little wet, it's kind of muting that brightness down a little, making it a little less extreme of a highlight in some spots. Some artists work in a completely different method from me, where they'll just start in one little corner and get it perfectly detailed and look exactly like the photo there, and do it all across the canvas in one sitting. But I do it a different way, where I work in layers, like you guys saw me put the base color down, and I start to add more and more detail as we go, bringing the whole painting to life as we work on it. Just very lightly pressing and just really quickly scribbling this brush around to get this textured look of the seaweed under the water. Right now it doesn't look like it's under the water, but we will get there. So by now I'm starting to kind of see where I'm keeping my shadows and my highlights with the water and kind of where they're starting to flow and make patterns. It's just all starting to slowly come together in my head, even though it's not totally together in the painting yet. Things are just starting to click and make a little more sense. Just kind of dragging that green around really loosely, letting it blend with some of these colors. Then we can take some of the colors from the reflection of the birds. I'm going to take some of my umber, my ochre, a little white, little sienna. I'm going to start to add a little bit of a reflection for this guy back here. He's got more green and brown in his reflection, just kind of dark, a little black. You can take some blue and black and really darken up that shadow right behind the pelican again. Now I want to do a little bit of blending with this flat tip brush here, so I'm going to take some of my phthalo blue and just start to blend some of these darker colors in here. And it's going to give a really thin, like translucent application, which is what I want. Just kind of letting it fade out. Any super bristly brush you have would work for this. So I'm kind of going over some of my highlights too, to get that more blue color. And because it's translucent, it's kind of letting me see through some of those highlights of the grasses underneath, but it still looks like I have water over it. And I'm going to switch back to this liner brush, and we're going to work on more of the reflections of the pelicans. Taking more of my browns and my yellow ochre. Let's do more actual yellow, azo. Start to add that there. And then for this guy, let's clean off our brush, get some white and some umber, a little bit of that violet blue. I'm just gonna thin it down a little bit. And let's get a little black too. Don't want it to be that bright. And we're just gonna add a little bit there. A little bit more here we can see. Go again. A little highlight here on the head. Reflection of the head. You want to get your brush really wet so you can get these like squiggly, water looking reflections. And then take some umber, blue, and black. Gotta add little shadows in between there too. For blue again. I think that we are ready for another round of highlights. So we're gonna take white. With this light blue violet color. And we're going to get some highlights on these little crests on the waves. So you should do these over top of sections that already have a little highlight. Just kind of boosting that up, put it over it, not under it. So like here's this blue line here, I put it at the top of that blue line, not at the bottom of it. And they're not all going to get this bright blue highlight, only some of them. And I'm really lightly pressing the canvas. Just want that water to gently go on there. A little bit more behind the pelican here. And this is where it starts to really look more like water. You can thin your paint down. If your paint's starting to like collect in blobs on the canvas, you want to thin it down to have a little more manageability. Don't forget that your ripples are getting a little bit closer together and smaller as you move farther into the distance. And then these are starting to get a little bit less bright, so I'm going to add more blue, ultramarine blue over here. And then here, let's see, let's get this one first. We've got some that are more translucent highlights, so I'm going to take that color with my brush that can make the paint a little more translucent. I'm going to put the paint down, then I'm going to take the extra paint off the brush, Just kind of push it around. Just keep taking the extra paint off your brush and push it around. That'll give you more of that look. I'm gonna have more of a shadow here. And I'll stick some black right under the pelican. Start to get a little bit of his wing shaped there. Back here we can do the same thing, get another shadow under the pelican. You can go in with another round of shadows everywhere if you want. Just to tone down some of those highlights a little bit. Take a little sap green. Go back to my liner brush and take more white. Start to add more highlights up here. We have highlights on the little ripples. A little highlight on bits of this ripple, not the whole thing. Now we gotta keep some shadows under all of these highlights, so let's just mix our ultramarine with our sap green and black. And just like a couple sections here where you have like the greenish gold and then the blue. Add a little shadow on the top of that ridge for those sections. Can add some more highlights over here. And I kind of want to lighten things up in the water again. Some of these spots still feel a little too dark. Just take my brush and put some little squiggles in here. See if I can lighten things up a little more. And I see something important here. I gotta make these highlights kind of blend for this ripple to read accurately. That looks better. You can just take some pure white for a couple of these. Just tiny, like, little drags of light, even smaller than what you did before. A little more blue and green. Green and umber and ochre. Can drag that color in here a little. Alright, we're gonna let that sit for a while. I'm gonna work on the pelicans. So this guy here, let's start with him. Just gonna take some white. We're gonna brighten up his beak. Basically just going over that shape again. And he's got a shadow on the one side, so I'm going to mix some black with brown. I'm just going to put a line right along the edge there using our liner brush. And I'm just going to use pure black for this side of his head. Take some umber, a little bit of sienna. And we'll fill in the brown on his head. He's got a little tuft of feathers at the top of his head, kind of sticking up from the wind. His cheek comes out just a little bit there, and he's got a highlight there, so we're going to take some of our flesh tint and ochre, and let's take some white too. Just add that highlight right here on the side of his face. The highlight kind of extends out to the right side of the face and comes down to right over the beak. And we're going to use that highlight color, add a little more white maybe for the body. Just kind of outlining it again. We've got a row of feathers that goes just above the base. Comes in right there. And I'm going to take just some pure white and add his little tail feathers. And the base of him, a little bit of the base. And this part of his chest, It's more white too. Take a little bit of brown there. Oops. And I'm going to touch up the beak. Gotta put an eye there, so I'm going to take some black. Just put the eye like right here. And I'm going to blend the black in a little with my other colors so it turns a little less dark. And get his little beak going there. And then we've got a little white with flesh tint and ochre. Right here is next doing a little spin there. And we got a little shadow on this side of his beak, on his chest. And I'm just gonna take some black and blue and make his chest a little less chubs. There we go. Put a little blue highlight there. Okay. Looking good. Let's take some black, our sienna, and we'll get the top of this wing line down. And kind of going into the white. It's got some darker feathers there. Just holding the brush at an angle and making these little marks to look like feathers. And just taking some black for the base. Just got another wing right there I can do. Then he's got some highlights. We'll take some sienna, some magenta, and I'm just making those little back and forth brush strokes. He's got just some white at the base of his wing feather. Again, just making these little U's to get the feathered look. It's a really light highlight right there. I can take some ochre too. And this just kind of bleeds into that darker black. I'm just doing a bunch of little dots here, little specks to blend these together. And let's do some white for the inner part of the back. Got a little highlight there. It's got more of a highlight down here on his tummy too. Gonna boost that highlight on the beak with the white and add a little bit of that more into the water. Take a little blue for his little foot and white. And I made some black in here too for shadows. More of the Pelicans body color, just to touch up his little shadow or his reflection. There we go. Let's take a little more of our sienna. Put that over here. I'm just going to take some sienna and black and add a little shadow to that side of him. All right. Another little highlight on his neck, the white. And his cheek. All right, cool. That pelican's looking good. Now let's move over to this pelican. And this pelican has more white, so I'm just going to take some pure white here and go over the head again. My liner brush still. And he's also got a couple little tufts of feathers that are kind of sticking up in the wind. And the top of his beak is white. And the other part of his beak has more brown / gray. Got a little bit of white here, like a line where the beak opens. And there's just some black. We'll add another color there so it's not too dark. Do that nice thin line there. And let's do another line for the base of the beak. He's looking good. I'll take some black. Put that right here in the blue part of the eye. Or the blue part of the head for his eye. And let's take a little bit of white. Just kind of touch up that blue section. Take some blue too. And he's got more of that yellow. And let's make his eye a little bigger. And add a little bit of white in his eye too, a little highlight. I know it was a little too much. Just gonna touch that up. We'll try that again. Take some black. And a teeny tiny dab of white. Alright, well, that'll work. Next, let's take some white and do the feathers on the body. It's got this section in the center that's a little lighter than everywhere else. Just working on these highlights, or the reflection again here. And working on the feathers, just carrying the brushstroke in the direction that the feathers are moving. Start to use more brown. I'm going to get a little more umber out. And we'll just blend that a little. Start to do the same thing with this. Follow the same direction that the feathers are moving. And we'll just take some black. Do a little line right there. And make your feathers start to come down. Now let's take some white again. Doing a bunch of tiny little tick marks with the paint to make it look like the feathers. Just adjusting his tail feathers a little bit. I think I made him a little too hectic looking there. Let me just go back and add a little reflection ripple. That looks better. Alright, we need some sienna and ochre. Just got a little more brown. These feathers. A little burnt umber. Do some more pure white for his wings again down here, or feathers. That looks better. All right, take some more white and we'll just touch up this part of the neck. And the beak. Straighten up the beak a little. And adjust this shadow. I'm gonna take my flat tip brush and add a couple more little highlights in the water in like the grassy areas. Just give a little more blue in some of these sections. Just kind of continuing to repeat my layering process until I'm happy with it and I can call it a finished painting. Finally, I'll just take white and add a couple little dots. It's like a couple little twinkles on the water. Alright guys, that's it. That's our finished painting. I'll call it Pelicans at Biscayne. Pelicans at Biscayne Bay, maybe. Here are the Pelicans. Hey guys, thanks for watching my painting tutorial. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my weekly painting tutorials. Thank you, bye bye.